Welcome to the first episode of Now I Begin Book Club. I'm Father Bill Brown of the Oblates of the Virgin Mary, and today we're going to be covering our first book, Atomic Habits by James Clear. All of us here have made New Year's resolutions, something that we want to do differently than we've done in the past. It could be a new diet, it could be a new exercise program or going to the gym, it can be praying more. We also know that some of our New Year's resolutions are not always successful. And the question is, why not? Well, if we look a little deeper, perhaps it's because we have not developed what's called habits, good habits that allow us to reach our goals. And so James Clear in this book, Atomic Habits, gives us a recipe by which we can be able to achieve the goals that we set for ourselves. But first, a story. In the very beginning of the book, James Clear talks about the British cycling team and how the shift of the team began to happen in 2003. But prior to that time, the cycling team was one of the worst cycling teams in the world. They had not won a gold medal since 1918. They hadn't won a Tour de France in 110 years. Even bike manufacturers didn't want the cycling team to ride their bikes for the bad advertising it would provide. But then it began to happen when they had one man named David Brailsford introduced what he called the aggregation of marginal gains, which would be atomic habits. In other words, he was saying if you can just increase one aspect of your cycling by 1% each and every day, over time, there'll be vast improvement in your skill. And that's what happened for the cycling team. So the process he introduced brought tremendous results. From 2007 to 2017, the British cycling team won 178 world championships, 66 gold medals in the Olympics and Paralympics medals. They were one of the best cycling teams in the history of all cycling. And how did that happen? It happened because of atomic habits, the aggregation of marginal gains over time that brought remarkable results. Today we're going to talk about some of the key ideas behind the book. So first of all, as James Clear would say, if you're having trouble changing your habits, the problem's not you, but it's really your system. So if we look at the word atomic, atomic are the building blocks of molecules. Just as those atoms are building blocks of molecules, atomic habits are building blocks of remarkable results. The second key idea is how habits shape your identity. And he breaks this up into what he calls three layers of behavioral change, changes of our behavior. The first layer is your outcomes. So for instance, I want to lose weight. I want to be able to run a 5K. I want to be able to pray more. The first layer is about your outcomes and the results that you hope to achieve. This is an important piece. You need to know what is the desired outcome that I want to reach, which leads to the second layer, which is the process by which I can reach the outcome. And this is concerned with changing your habits, but more importantly, changing your system of habits. In the case of, I want to exercise more. Well, I'm going to get into a normal routine of going to the gym. Or I want to be able to pray more. I'm going to set a consistent time in which I'm going to make time for my prayer. And by doing this, creating a process that it's going to hardwire the ability of the habits in our life. But the third layer is really the deepest, and it really is about your own identity, because sometimes our identity really is determined by our beliefs, our worldview, maybe some of the self images that we have of ourselves. So the most effective way to change your habits is to focus on not what you want to achieve, but the person that you want to be. So I'll say that again. Most of the habits, if it's going to be successful, is not to focus on what you wish to achieve, but on the person that you wish to become. I'll give you an example. So for me, a few years ago, I made a choice that I really wanted to do Eucharistic adoration every morning. I wanted to spend time before Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament for 1 hour. That was my goal. I set a goal for myself. That was and the outcome that I wished to achieve. And then I created a process. And the process that I created is every day at a certain time, I was going to go before the Lord. But why did I want to do that? Just because this is the right thing to do, this is a good thing to do? Well, that's part of it, but the main reason I wanted to do it is I wanted to be transformed by Jesus and grow in my own person and grow in holiness and my own spiritual growth. And the only way I was going to do that if I spent quality time with Him. So there was an outcome, there was a process, and there's the person that I wanted to become. So those are the 3 key elements in the second key idea of the book. The third key idea is the science of how habits work. And here he has a step-by-step plan for building better habits. And there are 4 things that are involved in this. And he would call them cue, craving, response, and reward. The cue is initiating a behavior, and it also predicts a reward. The craving is the motivation behind the habit. The response is actually the action that you take, and the reward is the benefit that you receive from that action that you take. So, for instance, you wake up in the morning and you feel exhausted. That is your cue. And then you have a craving, a motivation that you want to be more alert. And then the response, well, I'm going to drink a cup of coffee. By drinking a cup of coffee, I will be able to be more alert, which is the reward and the benefit that you receive, as well as enjoying a good cup of coffee. So these 4 steps that he outlines of cue, craving, response, and reward are the ways to establish good habits and to achieve the results and the goals that you have set for yourselves. So these ideas are really how the science of habits work, why we would actually begin to do a habit in the first place. And what they do is they create he calls a neurological loop. They reinforce themselves. The more that we do them, the more that reinforces the cells within us, and the more likely we will continue them. They won't be just a one and a done. And this leads to the really final key idea, and it builds on what I just spoke about. It's called the 4 laws of behavioral change. So the first law is to make it obvious. The second one is make it attractive. The third one is make it easy. And the fourth one is to make it rewarding, satisfying. So the first one, make it obvious. Here, one of the big things for any kind of habit, it has to be really concrete and measurable and achievable and tangible. And so one of the things we need to do that he talks about, there has to be a time, a location, and in which we're going to begin a new habit. So again, for prayer, as I mentioned to you before, Eucharistic adoration, I had to make it obvious. It was going to be a time, every time, the same time in the morning. It was going to be in a certain place in which I would pray. And that would make a big difference. It began to hardwire this desired outcome that I had in me. The same thing if you wanted to do exercise, to try to do it at the same place or the same time every morning. And then what begins to happen when we make it obvious is then one habit can build upon another habit. So the current habit that we establish then can lead to a second habit and then a third habit. So for instance, if we started meditation, that could lead then to now I'm going to go do exercise. And by building these habits, it builds greater confidence and greater likelihood that we'll continue that. The second law of behavioral change is make it attractive. None of us really want to do something if it's not very attractive. It's going to be hard to do at first. And this is what he calls the dopamine drive feedback loop. The dopamine drive feedback loop. So it's when you experience pleasure and anticipate pleasure. So when we experience pleasure by doing whatever the habits that we're going to set for ourselves, it's going to be more likely that we're going to keep doing them because we're going to get a benefit, and it's going to inspire us and encourage us to keep going. The third law is make it easy. If something is too complicated, no matter what it is, we're just not going to do it. If it's simpler, if it's easier, there's a greater chance that we'll be able to attain the habit that we're trying to establish. Habits is the process by which behaviors become, as he says, progressively more automatic through repetition. And he talks about neurons in our brains. And here, the more habits are put into practice, then they're hardwired. And then they become really second nature. And when they become second nature, they become a lot easier. And each time that you repeat an action, as he says, you're activating a particular neural circuit associated with that habit. And this is one line that he says that's important. The most effective form of learning is practicing, not planning. So we can plan all we want, but if we're actually not practicing it, the planning means nothing. And then he gives what's called this 2-minute rule. 2 minutes should take less than 2 minutes to begin to establish a habit. For instance, if you want to read a book, we're doing a book club. You know, sometimes you go, I want to read all these books. Well, just try to read one book and maybe one page of one book. Just start something. Second thing is, I want to study for class. Don't think of all the things you have to cover. Maybe just open your notebook and look at your notes. Or I want to do a 5K. I want to run 3 miles. Well, why don't you just put on your shoes, tie your shoelaces, and begin to walk, and then eventually to run. So the idea of habits, just start somewhere. Don't let even the perfect be the enemy of the good. So the last one, and this key idea, is making it satisfying. And it's very simple. I'm just going to give you one phrase. He says, what is immediately rewarded is repeated. So what is immediately rewarded is repeated. And then he also would say what is immediately punished is avoided. So when something's really satisfying and you're seeing the benefits, which takes some work at first, it's going to have a greater likelihood that it's going to last and that you're going to grow spiritually or personally or professionally in your life. Questions that you want to ask yourself to change your behavior. How can I make it obvious? How can I make it attractive? How can I make it easy? And how can I make it satisfying? So I'm going to give you one example because some of these books that we're going to be covering, they may not be spiritually specific, but let's apply it to our spiritual lives. So again, a couple years ago, I decided to do the examine. Some of us know that as the examination of conscience. But it's more than just looking at our faults or what we're failing to do right. It's also looking at where is God present in each and every day? Where are the areas where I want to grow? Where are the areas I responded to His grace? So I was hit and miss on what's called the examine. And so I decided I was going to begin to try to do it every day. So I do it in the morning for the day before. And what I do is I just write in my journal for about 5 minutes, no more than 10. And I look back over the previous day and I say, where was God? Where was He present in my life? These are a couple areas that I've been trying to grow in. How did I see myself growing in those areas? I just went on a retreat, and these are the things that God showed me. How am I trying to put that into practice? And by doing this regular routine over time, it became hardwired. It was, I made it obvious. I did it in the morning. It was very attractive, motivational. It was easy to do. I did it in 5 or no more than 10 minutes. And it was satisfying because I was beginning to be able to measure my growth. And so this particular habit has helped me to grow in my spiritual life, in my relationship with God, and my relationship with others. And so this book, Tiny Changes, brings remarkable results, starts with the first step. And it's about the aggregation of marginal gains. Small 1% increases of improvement over time that can help us to grow. So while we may not win a gold medal on a cycling team, we can achieve the results that we desire to attain and the growth that we hope for in all aspects of our life. So take the first step and start building your good habit today. And for next time, and our next book is going to be The Freedom of Self-Forgetfulness by Tim Keller. And this is what he calls the path to true Christian joy. And what he's going to talk about here is the power of the ego and sometimes how it can get in the way of allowing us to be gospel-centered people that act like Christ and reflect his love in the world. So we hope you'll join us for our next episode. Thank you for being with us today. God bless you.